Hey, joining us now, friend of the show and writer, author, TV host of Brad Meltzer's Decoded, you name it. And he wrote a new book. It's called Heroes for My Daughter. And he already wrote one for his son. So welcome to the show, Brad. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
All right, man, let me just start right off. Why do people need heroes? I mean, it's 2012, and the average young person is going to say, hey, I don't need heroes. I can do this on my own. Why do you feel your children need a hero to begin with?
Listen, whether you like it or not, your kids are going to find heroes. And the only question is do you want any say in it? So you want to leave them to their own, go to it, and have fun when they pick a reality show star. To me, when my daughter was born, I was like, I want to write a book for her that shows her what a real hero is. I started with people like Sally Ride, right? People know Sally Ride's the first female American astronaut in space. But why her? Why'd they pick her of all the great people in America? And some say it was because she was a physics genius. Others say it was because she was this incredible athlete. She was a tennis player. And some say she was fearless. And those were all true. But here's what also had to happen. Is Sally Ride had to see an ad in her college newspaper looking for volunteers and answer it. She had to see an opportunity and seize it. And I said, I want my daughter to learn that lesson. And that's where Heroes for My Daughter as a book was really born.
Now, how about just your kids in general, growing up in this day and age, like you say, looking for those types of things? Do they still do what you and I did and look to our parents for heroes? I mean, some would argue, hey, Brad Meltzer's not a bad hero. He went and got it. He came from sort of a blue-collar background and still reached for his dream. So why outsiders?
In terms of who you should look for, everyone needs a hero. I don't care what you do. And I think I can give you your mom and your dad and your grandmother, and that's who I end the book with. But I think there are, we should also be looking at more and more and more examples. There's great ones out there. And my favorite heroes in the book are the ones you've never heard of, right? Yes, you get Amelia Earhart and you get Rosa Parks and you get Christopher Reeve. The book is filled with one-page stories of amazing things they've done, a new hero on every page. But I love that we have people like Alexandra Scott, young Alex Scott, who's a little girl diagnosed with cancer who decides to open up a lemonade stand in her front yard. And she does it because she wants to use the money to help other kids with cancer. So in a single day, Alex's lemonade stand raises $2,000. But here's what I love, Jim, is suddenly other lemonade stands start popping up, all with Alex's name on them. And then she says, let's set a new goal, $1 million. So on June 12, 2004, hundreds of lemonade stands open up in every state in the country, ordinary people selling water and sugar and lemon to help kids with cancer. And I love that, but here's the sad part, is nearly 2 months later, Alex dies. She's 8 years old when she dies. She says before she dies, though, let's set a new goal, $5 million. To this day, Alex's lemonade stand has raised over $45 million, and it is still going strong. One girl, one idea, one big dream.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, you're not stuck with just females for role models and heroes, too. So answer two parts of this for me, Brad. First of all, why did you also mix in males? And second of all, how do you contrast the heroes you chose for your son?
Yeah, to answer the first part, if I went and did Heroes for my son and just put in men and said women couldn't be heroes to him, I'd be an idiot, right? And the same with my daughter. If I'm going to do a book for her with heroes, it's going to have men as well as women. Listen, there's far more women in the book, no question. And you got to be a pretty certain kind of man to be in this book. It's Abraham Lincoln, Randy Pausch wrote the last lecture, Benjamin Franklin. It's a high-quality group there. But as for how they differ, they don't differ at all, not a bit. I have Anne Sullivan in my son's book who taught Helen Keller, who's in my daughter's book. There's no difference to me. They're amazing people. But the funny part is, when I handed in the book, my editor said she had one problem. I said, what's the problem? She said, the problem is that you use one word over and over again, the word fighter. I used the word fighter in over a dozen entries, she said. I used the word fighter, she pointed out, in the Dalai Lama's entry. He's a pacifist, and I called him a fighter, right? And so that shows you, one, my lack of command of the English language. But here's what I don't apologize for. I want my daughter to learn how to fight. I want her to know that at some point in time, when she needs something, she's going to have to fight for it. And when she sees injustice, she should fight far harder than she's ever fought before. And I tell her, don't be the princess waiting on the prince to come rescue you. You can rescue yourself.
Brad, it's in some ways harder for children of successful parents, at least in my limited intelligence. I look at it and I say, how do they decide what they want to be? Folks like us, we just said, hey, we need to make it, be the first in our families to make it in some form into what I used to call the white-collar world. So when you have successful parents, it's much easier to not be able to find yourself and to find your talents. So how do you differ as a parent who has a nice home and has a nice upbringing and the lessons you try to teach your children?
Listen, if you said to me, beyond worrying about my kids' health and safety, probably the number one thing that I fear is that they're just not going to appreciate and be spoiled by what they have, right? I grew up and I shared a room with my sister till I was 13 years old because we couldn't afford any place bigger, right? That was the way it was. And we went shopping at, Kmart and places like that for clothes because that's all we could afford. My kids get nice clothes. They do. I buy them a good shirt. Now I make their shirts for them because I was just tired of them wearing princesses and stuff on them. We started our own shirt company to do it. But the funny part is but that's why you need these heroes, is to remind them of where these people came from. Amelia Earhart, she's in the book not because she broke records or not because she, disappeared and is a great mystery. She's in it because she wasn't a natural pilot. She had to work at it. Here's Amelia Earhart, one of the most famous pilots of all time. She wasn't natural. She just worked harder than anyone else. That's the lesson that I want for my kid, not to be famous, but to work hard.
How about yourself? I know it's a little bit cliche or trite to ask, but your own heroes, flat out, and don't hedge it on me, Brad. I mean, who was your number one hero in your world?
For me, if you ask on the famous side, it's Mr. Rogers. Is one of them. I love someone like that. Or Abraham Lincoln, a guy who just stands up and says, you know what, I don't care what when Abraham Lincoln ran to be senator of Illinois, he stood against the people, he stood against the judges, he stood against his opponents. He committed political suicide. He was absolutely 100% lost that race. But he was right because he stood up for other people's rights. So even though he was totally defeated and never became that senator, he fought for what was right, and I respect that. But if you ask me my real hero, they're in the last pages of the book. My mother's in there. My grandmother's in there. My grandmother, when Heroes for My Daughter came out a couple days ago, it was what would have been my grandmother's 94th birthday. She died last year. And when she lost my grandfather, her husband, everyone said she won't be able to go on. She loves him so much. She went on for over 20 years. Then she went blind, and they said she'll never go on, and she went on. And then she went nearly deaf, and they said she'll never go on, and she went on. And I'd see her, and I'd say, Nah, how you doing? She'd always say the same thing. She'd say, oh, I can't complain. And I was like, are you kidding? You can complain all day long. You are blind, and you are nearly deaf, and you are a widow. How could you not complain? But to her, she had everything because she had her family. And for you, though, the best hero in the book is on the last page. The last pages are blank. And they say your hero's photo here and your hero's story here. And I promise you, you take a picture of your mom or your grandmother, a military member of your family, and you put their picture in this book, and you write one sentence of what they mean to you, that's not just a good Mother's Day present. That's the most important hero in Heroes for My Daughter.
You were kind enough to send me an advance copy, and you've met my daughter. I have a 10-year-old daughter. So as I'm flipping through the book the day I got it, and I see on the front that you can sign it over to someone. I signed it over to my daughter, my hero, and she's sitting in the back seat of the car, and I hand her this book, and she starts tearing up, and I'm tearing up, and she's tearing up, and I'm like, but Samantha, you have to read the book, though, because there are lessons here, and you need to read the book. And she's, Dad, it's too sad. I said, it won't be sad the whole book. It's just she read your introduction, and she got all sad with it. But this is an attempt, and a nice one, too, to bond with your kids. You did this on purpose. You want people to sit down and share these things. What kind of feedback do you get? You're a social network guy on Heroes for My Daughter.
The funny part is I don't get any sadness. I get people saying they're inspired, that they want to go do something. I had we had the national columnist Ask Amy, who took over for Ann Landers, or Dear Abby, said about Heroes for My Son that it was the best graduation present for high school seniors graduating from college or high school. I read it with my young kids. I have a pastor who says even if you don't have kids, you should read it every day for a little bit of inspiration. And I got one today. A couple of days ago that said that they were sharing these heroes with their daughters, and their daughters were learning about these amazing people that they, instead of talking about a dumb athlete or, again, a reality show star, they're talking about Rosa Parks. My friend said to me flat out, he said, Brad, I read all your novels. Like, this is the most important book you're ever going to write because you're introducing people to Eleanor Roosevelt and to these amazing heroes that are out there, and teaching these young girls to be strong for themselves. And to me, that's an awesome legacy to have. That's to me, as humbling as anything I'll ever do.
Sometimes, Brad, I see an author write a book like this, and I say, you know what? Is he just trying to keep his name out there or whatever? I mean, you have a million projects going. Your books are bestsellers. You probably have enough money. I mean, so you could have written this and kept it private for your own children. Why get it out there?
You know, a very fair question. When I actually started this book, and on the day that I was born, my dad went to the liquor store and bought a bottle of champagne. And he said, I'm going to open this bottle of champagne when my son gets married. And when he lost his job and we moved from New York to Florida, you load up the moving truck. And the moving truck, everything you put in the truck that's filled with, your clothes and your couch and your TV, that's your stuff. But what you keep in the car with you that you don't let the movers touch, that stuff, that's your life, right? That's what you won't let anyone touch, or you won't risk it all. And when we moved down and drove down to Florida, in the back seat of the car with my sister and myself, behind our headrests, I remember there were 2 bottles of champagne rolling back and forth in the Florida sun. My parents knew nothing about taking care of champagne, but they made it very clear in that moment we were their lives, right? That's what they took, if anything. And when I started this book, was determined that I wasn't going to buy a bottle of champagne. I was going to eventually write this book, and it was going to be private, and it was going to just be for my kids. And then the real answer was my mom died. I lost my mother 4 years ago. And I was going to write this book and not give it to them until they were getting, God willing, married or something wonderful when they were older. But I realized in that moment that it was time to really put it together and don't hold it to yourself. That, sometimes you can't save the good words for the eulogy. You got to put them out there before that happens. And that was the only reason why I felt like, let's put this out here. And the truth is I probably shouldn't be publishing it. I should probably go write another novel. They pay me far more to do that. But these are the stories I love to tell. They are part of my core belief that ordinary people change the world. In fact, as I said, when I was looking around and we were doing the book, we actually I was looking around for shirts for my daughter and saw all these princesses and sports teams for my son, and I said, I could do better than that. I have better heroes than that. So I have a friend who's a well-known cartoonist draw a picture, a little cartoon of Amelia Earhart, wrote, I am Amelia Earhart below it, and on the back we wrote, I know no bounds. And my daughter put it on. She loved it. We showed the estate of Amelia Earhart. They loved it. My wife said, I want one. And we started this company with the estates of Lucille Ball and Muhammad Ali. We got Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. And if you can wear real heroes on your chest, if you go to ordinarypeoplechangetheworld.com, you can see them. And I just love that we get to put those real heroes out there.
Well, that's a great idea, and I will be doing that. And you always tie in nicely with me. We ran down to the studio today. We have a moving truck at my house right now. And I told Valerie, my wife, before I left, don't put my important boxes in the truck. They're going in the car with me.
That's right? Because those are the things that are vital to you. And I'll tell you, when I got married, my dad did open the champagne. And we had this big toast, and it came up. It was the foulest, nastiest bottle of champagne I ever had, but it was the greatest glass of champagne I had in my life as well.
Look, you wrote comic books. Now, you want to talk about fighters and heroes and that sort of thing. So you grew up with this somewhere in your head from a child that there needs to be heroes and it's good to have a hero. How did that play into your thinking?
Listen, you know me long enough. I love comic books. I love superheroes. And I don't love them because they wear capes and their underwear on the outside of their pants. I love them because they stand for something good. They're unapologetic about fighting for what's right. And to me, that is lost. That is a lost art in this country, just demanding to say that there is good and there is bad. And you know what? I believe there is good and there is bad. And most important, I believe you have to stand for good. If you just stand for yourself, you stand for nothing. You stand for someone else, though, you stand for good. And that's why I love, to me, Superman as a character. To me, the most important part of the story is not Superman. The most important part of the story is Clark Kent. And you want to know why? Because we're all Clark Kent. Because we all know what it's like to be boring and ordinary and wish we could do something incredibly beyond ourselves. And when we launched this book, actually, last week, Christopher Reeve is one of the heroes in the book. And he's in the book not because he played Superman. He's in the book because when he got in this accident, fell off a horse and became paralyzed. And what he did and fought for others, becoming an advocate, that's why he was a hero. And at the book signing in Washington, D.C., his daughter, Christopher Reeve's daughter, actually came to the book signing. And my daughter got to introduce Christopher Reeve's daughter, and she read from the book. She does amazing work with the Reeve Foundation for people with disabilities. And I'll tell you what, whatever else happens in life, that was one of the highlights of my professional life, is to watch that happen. That, to me, was putting out some good in the world.
Brad, let me ask you something that I don't usually ask you. We're talking about Heroes for My Daughter. The book just came out. You got to go. We'll get the website out to people in just a second. But you always tell the story, and it's a great story, about the gentleman that you had hired to write your obituary. Let me ask you what you wish that your family and your friends, your inner circle, to pardon the pun, would say you want to say about you when you're gone. And not the public, but these people who know you real well. Brad was what?
You know what? Here's the thing about obituaries. You don't get to write your own obituary. They're always written by somebody else. What we get to do, and our power is, we get to live our lives and try to help other people. And if you just said to me he loved his kids, that's good by me. Like, I don't need a title. I don't need a, it's not about fame. That's all nonsense to me. To me, it's about being a good person. Did you help someone in your life? Then you did good. And that's all you can really ask for.
All right, let me ask you about a website connected to this, because I'm sure you have heroesformydaughter.com. Before we get to that, Brad, I got to say, one of your books, and I forget which one because I read them in a succession, said, I went to the website because I'm anal and had to do it. That you had mentioned a website. It was with an attorney, I think, who was an accident attorney. And when I got to the website, it said, you didn't think we were too cheap to not buy this domain name, did you? That's why.
Yeah.
Those are the reasons you're my favorite author. See, you're not afraid to do that. I think that you have to do that in life. Smile at yourself a little bit and go that extra mile, because fans love that stuff on the side. All right, what did you do for Heroes?
We had a website called Down with Tickets. He was a guy who was a traffic ticket lawyer in the Book of Fate. And every time he goes anywhere, he's always pushing his thing, down with tickets, down with tickets, down with tickets. And I was like, you know what, let's buy it. And when you go to the website and you actually go there in real life, it says, what, you really thought we were going to be so cheap we wouldn't buy the website? It costs like $10. So I love that. I love that people go there and are just as crazy like me. That I always go when I see a website. I'm always like, did they buy it, or did they just make that up?
All right, Heroes for My Daughter. You have a website for it, I'm sure.
Yeah, here you can go to Heroes for My Son. You can go to Heroes for My Daughter. You can go to BradMeltzer.com. You can find us on Facebook. And if you want to buy a shirt, you, of course, can go to OrdinaryPeopleChangeTheWorld.com, or even my website, BradMeltzer.com, and you can find them there.
And everybody has goals in their world, and mine is to get a reference in one of your books. So I might have to blow something up or save the world or do whatever, but somewhere down the line. Brad, always a pleasure. Thank you for coming here in Arizona.
Thanks,
we got a
Jim.
chance
Always
to
appreciate
meet
it, pal.
you. And go get his book, Heroes for My Daughter. Brad Meltzer, everybody. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, pal.
Somewhere beyond the sea,